Hi. In a previous video, I gave advice on what makes a great interview for younger candidates. In this video, I'm going to focus on what worked for older candidates whom I worked with as of more recently, I would say. Okay, so I will focus on 5 points here. The first point I'd like to talk about here is that older candidates tend to take interviews more seriously than younger candidates. Okay, so which is a good thing because all in all, I've been able to have far more successes with older candidates than with younger ones. Now, this being said, I've also noticed some predictors of success in these older candidates who took interviews more seriously. And the broader thing you must understand is that behavioral interviews take a lot of time to prepare. Okay, so it's often that I hear, Dan, I wish I had like 6 months to prepare my interview. Now, what you should take away from this is that having an outcome-driven approach with your interview prep is probably your best strategy. What do I mean by outcome-driven? Well, you should limit your interview prep to clear goals, because preparing these interviews basically boils down to 2 things: having a story bank and role-playing it. Okay, so if you manage to have an outcome-driven approach where your story bank would be 20 stories revised 3 or 4 times, and you would role-play them, I don't know, during 5 coaching sessions, then that's an outcome-driven approach. When compared to someone who would overthink, so to speak, their story bank, would brainstorm endlessly for 50 plus stories, and then not even have time to role-play before their job interview. So I've had a lot of success with people who are outcome-driven in their interview prep, and I would advise you consider the same. Okay. The second thing I like to talk about here would be questions around conflict and conflict resolution. Okay, so for some reason I noticed that having a challenge answering questions around conflict resolution is a negative sign interviewing with these high-performing companies. And specifically here, I've had plenty of candidates who came with this reasoning. Then, I'm a very likable person. Throughout my career, I've never had any major conflicts because I'm likable. I also I very much like not to have conflicts. I prefer not to have conflicts than to have them. Okay, this would be the reasoning. I cannot really talk about conflict. And the same goes with the behavior of exhibiting backbone. I don't know, maybe having some beef with your boss and standing your ground in that situation to really keep it your way because you knew it was the right thing to do, or vice versa, to commit to your boss's decision, which in turn could have been a good idea. Okay, but long story short, the reason why I'm mentioning this topic of conflict resolution is because not having experience with conflict resolution or struggling with this can be an indicator that you have not worked in high-performing environments. Okay, because what happens in high-performing environments, or even in startups, so to speak, there's a lot of conflict, and unless you build, conflict resolution skills, it will be quite challenging for you to thrive in such environments. So that's why smart interviewers will look at how people answer conflict resolutions to determine if you have experience with these things. So my advice to you would be to really spend a little bit of time to tune up your examples around conflict resolution, exhibiting backbone in general, because this does matter a lot in these job interviews. Okay. The third piece of advice, an easy one, probably easier said than done, I should say, is maintaining a positive attitude. Okay, and engagement levels, and keeping your energy levels high, or at least constant, throughout the interview. So what happens is there is that dynamic where you start interviews with full energy, and then you end your interview, depleted, fully demoralized, blocked, and whatnot. So what you should also keep in mind here is that keeping your performance uniform as much as possible and being able to perform toward in the second part of your interview is equally important as you would perform in the first part of that interview. Okay, so also important to note here is that it's not uncommon at all that people block in these job interviews. And what happens if you block in these job interviews, it's not the end of the road unless you remain blocked for the remainder of the job interview. Okay, so that's why I'm saying positive attitude and energy levels are something you should take seriously, because these things show. And on the topic of a positive attitude, stress shows in job interviews. Okay, so whenever you feel super stressed, that will show in your answers. So that's why keeping a positive attitude and maybe not ending your answers on a negative note is something you might also want to consider here. This is something I noticed especially for older candidates. Advice number 4. Don't expect screening rounds to correlate with interview prep. So in other words, interview prep doesn't correlate well with passing screening rounds. So you should set your expectations accordingly. Okay, so what happens here is that I see growing, like I said in the beginning of this video, older candidates tend to prep their interviews or to take these interviews more seriously. However, I'm trying here to advise you to manage your expectations when it comes to screening rounds, because they don't correlate with interview prep. Now you may wonder what does correlate with passing screening rounds. Well, if you have someone to refer you for that role, if you have 5 people to refer you for that role, you are far more likely to pass those screening rounds than by thoroughly preparing a job interview as you would for a final interview round. Okay, so strategic networking pays off in passing screening rounds, okay, especially nowadays. Okay, and the 5th piece of advice here, which is probably the most important one, which I found especially for older candidates, is that what happens as you grow older, and as I grew older, I noticed that my listening skills improved. Okay, so older people tend to be better listeners, and you'll be amazed how important it is to read the room during a job interview, to read the room for what they're actually asking you and to give them what they're actually looking for. Don't just answer interview questions, because these might be far more significant than even your whole interview prep process. Okay, so listening skills should be a strength, especially in older candidates. And in my experience, this is something that can pay big time, and it did pay off big time with a good number of older candidates that reported back to me, hey Dan, yes, knowing how to read the room and to give them what they're actually looking for was the key to success in my job interview. So I hope you found this advice useful, and thank you very much for watching.